Okay. So today we're gonna try to finish what we started last time. And last time we looked at food, science of food and cooking. And in particular, we looked at some chemistry, some basic chemistry that we had to consider. And also we had a kind of idea, even through the representation of molecules, how some of these things could be and getting kind of complicated. Today we're gonna instead having a look at the food physics. So we're looking at some particular phenomenon from the physics side. So in this particular cases, we are not considering any transformations or reactions, but how the molecule eventually behave and in a different manner, subject to different physical variations. And one of the parameters, for example, could be the temperature or pressure. And then after this, we'll try to have a look at some industrial way of treating the food for keeping and lasting them longer. So in terms, let's start with this little example here. And we're trying to discover which cook faster, an egg in salty water or an egg in fresh water. Which egg cooks slower, if it's boiled in Colorado or at Carolina Beach. So we are in two different pressure conditions, atmospheric pressure. And or two eggs are placed in boiling water at sea level and cook at an identical degree on a sunny or on a stormy day. Which would take longer to cook? Now, obviously, those are just a silly example, but just to illustrate, at the end of the day, we're going to cook and boil the egg just the same. Most probably, it will taste just the same, and the taste will not be driven by the way we cook, either if we boil in salt water or fresh water, but it will give us an idea and an incentive to actually try to understand some physical parameters that might affect our daily life. So let's see, cooking at high altitude. This is an example from US. So some of the units, they don't follow the SI system, and so they speak in terms of feet, inches, and Fahrenheit degrees. But at the end of the day, due with the right adjustment, situation is actually the same. So it states that if you are a newcomer to the area of Wyoming, you might wonder why potatoes take longer to cook or why your cakes continually fall. Recipes from low altitude usually need to be adjusted at the altitude above 3,000 feet. And these adjustments are made in time, temperature, and or ingredients. So the environmental factor can actually make a difference and influence the way we're cooking. And this is due to this variation of physical properties. Let's try to see why. Why at the high altitude, we do have some parameters that actually are changing or are affecting this. At high altitude, we do have lower air pressure. Okay, what does it mean, lower air pressure? In general, at any location, we feel and we experience every time and at any moment the air pressure. It means the weight of the air column that is above us. Okay, so if we go higher in leveling, so on higher height, the column of air that we do have acting on us will be less. So we don't have less pressure. Okay, same story that the divers know quite well, right? If they go dive and they go, let's say, 10 meters below the sea level or 20 meters below the sea level, the pressure increases. And that pressure is due to the column of water that they don't have on top of them. Okay? And in general, for the divers, it's every 10 meters, there is an average of increase of the atmosphere of the pressure of one atmosphere. So at the depth of 10 meters, the diver will experience the um, pressure of the column of water, so 1 atmosphere, plus the pressure of the column of the air on top of the water. Okay, so that's the reason why we don't have this variation with altitude. But this decreases water boiling temperature point from 2012 to 2003. We're talking here Fahrenheit. Okay, so in this diagram over here, let's see if the pointer decides to work today. We do have this diagram that on this axis will show us the pressure, and on this axis will show us the temperature. Okay, these lines represent the points and the combination of pressure and temperature to pass and to move from water to gas, okay, water vapor, or water to ice, or ice to water vapor. So we need to have some particular condition in temperature and pressure to move from one state to the other. So from solid to liquid. Yes. In fact, the we are over here. Okay. At the higher altitude, we are here. At the lower altitude, we are here because the pressure increases a bit, and also the boiling point is at a higher level in terms of temperature. Okay. And some of those diagrams also are valid for any kind of material. And I'm not sure if we saw it when we were looking at the formation of some minerals, but they're basically the same kind of diagrams or similar. So what? This variation, so the lower boiling point, affects cooking of vegetable, eggs, and several other things, and the internal structure of baked product, because water and liquids evaporates faster, and living gases in bread and cakes expand more. So that's why it's like more, we don't have these differences. So ideally, we should adjust our recipes for such, to take into account of such thing. Okay. Obviously, nobody, I think, is gonna do this in a lab style in their kitchen. They actually maybe experiment a bit. They observe this and um, adjust little the way of cooking. Okay. If water boils at lower temperature, and now we jump from cake to one of the ingredients, I guess, very useful to make the cakes, the eggs. In general, food cooks in a water, cooked in water or steam, take longer to cook. Okay, so cooking time must be increased from 4 to 11%, okay, every 1,000 feet. So it's something that, again, if we have to boil the egg for 60 seconds or 100 seconds, 4% is not that much. It's something that we don't even count, right? But it's a factor that will affect, and now we know why. And a pressure cooker is a great cooking. It's great for cooking meats and vegetables, and we use maybe daily. But it requires long cooking at higher altitude. Always the reason is the same that we explained before. Increasing the pressure, though, the temperature at which water boils is raised, and food cooks more quickly. And everything is summarized again, if we go back to this diagram, okay? If pressure increases, here, we do have an increase also of temperature here, okay? So that's how this kind of, let's say, instrument will work. Let's see. Yes, and this also, but this is also affected because of the altitude. At altitude, pressure and temperature. Exactly. So when making bean soup, the starch inside the cells swell and soften, so the beans will be tender. And we do have some tricks as well. I mean, when we prepare this, even adding baking soda to make them tender. So in presence of acid, stretch within cells can swell, so the cells don't even break down. And now we'll recall why we're using eventually baking soda. Because baking soda, we will get neutralize the acidic component and making the beans become softer. Okay, so we don't have to add acid ingredients such as tomato, wine, lemon juice, or whatever. And otherwise, we just slow this process of tendering the stuff. That's why usually when we prepare like bean soup, just baking soda is added at the beginning. Once they're tender, then they can be flavored with even some more acidic stuff, obviously according to taste. But that's another story. So in general, temperature, kinetic and phases, the water activities, and we're going to see also something about foam, emulsions, and gels are something that belongs to the food, the physics food, okay? Let's see what this temperature and kinetic energy concepts are, okay? We know what temperature is and how it's related to kinetic energy. We also saw in the past few lectures that we do have our material that is made by the connection, let's call it this way, of several molecules, and those never stops moving. Okay, they are there and always they are somehow vibrating. Okay, so moving. Net energy of movement, exactly. And in the classical mechanic, we do have two type of energy that usually in a simplistic way, the potential energy and the kinetic energy. The potential, and together they represent the total energy of a body that eventually can be conserved. Okay, and now we'll see what like through an example just to clarify these two concepts, right? If I place this object at the edge of this table, at the same time, the total energy on um, on this object has some value, but we can consider this total energy as the summation of the potential energy and the kinetic energy. Okay, The potential energy over here is maximum. Yes. And the potential energy at this point is maximum, right? And this potential energy depends upon, considering gravity a constant, depends upon the height, okay? And potentially this can move, okay? And then we activate it, and this, if I keep pushing, this will start following, okay? So this potential energy now will so depends on the height. We are like, let's say, 2 meters above the ground, and depends even on the mass. Now, but we keep the mass constant is in this experiment, okay? So the only things, if I start this object to move and I place it this moving, okay, and so I will let it fall down, what actually the parameters that changes is the height, because it will go from 2 meters down to ground level, 0 meters, okay? So when this reaches down, so at the ground level, the potential energy will be 0, okay? Because depends, we said, if the other factors are constant, it depends from the height. The height now is 0 because we are at the ground level, so the energy is 0. However, what happens halfway through? It's going to be half. But let's look now at the kinetic energy. The kinetic energy of this object depends upon velocity, right? At this very moment, this object has 0 velocity because it's steady, it's not moving, okay? So the potential energy at this level on top of this table, it's at its maximum. The kinetic energy is equal to 0. When it starts moving, okay, we said that the potential energy will decrease because the height is going to decrease. But what happened to the object? It starts moving. It accelerates. It has a velocity, right? So the potential energy will increase as it goes down. Just before, let's say, the crashing point, the potential energy is going to be 0 because we are at the 0 level, and the kinetic energy will be the maximum. So the total sum, it's conserved, we say. So it's always the same value during the entire process. One goes from 0 to maximum, and the other one goes from the maximum, the potential, down to 0. Okay? In case of the molecules, so this is into the mechanic approach, just to visualize in a way that this kinetic energy depends upon these parameters, velocities. But the molecules, they move, they continuously move. So the faster the molecules move, the more energy they have, or the more energy they need to move. Okay? So if they move faster, let's visualize this in pre-COVID time, right? Let's assume as we are a bunch of particles, okay, in this room. If we stay low, so we are not excited, our temperature is quite low, we stay here, and even if we start to move, okay, and mixing up, obviously pre-COVID period, it's very hard that we start colliding against each other, right? Maybe we don't meet, we don't have all this big room and this big space all for us. But it might happen that we'll start moving faster, okay? Faster and faster. We'll start running, jumping, going around. Then the possibility that we don't have to bump to each other, it's much higher, okay? So the energy has increased into that system, okay? And if we just to give an example, and to visualize, we materialize this kind of energy with our fatigue, with our running and stuff, that's what happens, okay? So if we do have an increase of the heat of the energy, there will be more possibility of these molecules to bump, okay? And they move at higher speed. If those molecules move at higher speed, then another molecule, they bump to each other, okay? So this molecule will transfer part of its energy to this lower moving particle, okay? And that's, even in that silly example, it's something that we can visualize considering us as molecules moving randomly in this room, okay? That's what happens if we mix boiling hot water with cold water. The fast and slow moving molecules will move next to and into one another. In the end, all will move at the new average speed, which is somewhere in between the hot and the cold temperature. So everything has been balanced out. So some part of the energy of that system has been transferred and everything has been cooled down and brought at an average level. Okay? Yes. Exactly. Always, that's one of the basic principles that exactly cannot be destroyed or created, always transformed. And one classical example is burning something, right? So we do have a certain mass, let's say a piece of wood or an object that we're going to burn. So we're creating form of energy by burning that object, right? But we're not creating an energy. We are transforming that mass through some processes and something else. And the energy balance at the end of the day of the process is not just given by the heat that we can use to warm up, but also by the volatile components, the energy necessary, obviously, to burn, the residual mass. So overall, the balance is the same. Parts of it, because yes, exactly, because that's always kind of recycled or transformed in different forms. Yes, and even like uh, let's say anything that we do, some it's lost through heat, and obviously in some cases we can recover that heat and use for something else. But um, no, just it doesn't go like it just let's say spread around and then eventually will it's absorbed by others. It depends on the other processes. We can use that for steam up water and create some other energy, and so it's correct. Yes, but that depends on several processes. Now, uh, what we learned that molecules move faster at higher temperature. That's what we said. If we do one like in that example, we saw this kind of definition. So now that we know that they are moving faster at higher temperature, let's see what happens. And let's move to the next step, phases and phase changes. At a certain temperature, the energy of the molecules becomes such that they will transition into a new phase. An everyday example is water. Ice is the solid phase, so it's the solid uh, is when water is in a solid state, Water is the liquid phase or the liquid state, and water vapor it's in terms of gases. So using this example, you will probably be able to tell that the solid phase is always the one at the lowest temperature. And so this is a way that we visualize the things. If we go on the extreme, higher temperature, so we place each other in the case of gases phase, okay, gases state, and that particular time we do need a lot of energy, and the molecules will just move faster and randomly in the space in which they are confined. So in general, the temperature at which a molecule, either in solid, liquid, or gases, depends on the molecules itself. Oils set a different temperature than water, and this caused by the different attractive forces between molecules. In the previous lectures, we saw that molecules can be combined through several kinds of bondings and different wave of interactions, right? This, obviously, it's not the same for every material. We also made some examples. And we do have, therefore, we do have that even at liquid form or at solid form, we need different temperature to have something happening, right? And we know this even with the solid material. Let's say iron and or another metal, they melt at different temperature. Okay, we can melt easier at home the lead. So if we go fishing, maybe we can reconstruct our lead and our weight for our fishing rods, right? And that can be done quite quickly because the melting point is lower than the iron. Okay, so and the same goes for this example, kitchen example, difference between water and oils. Molecules exert quite a lot of different types of forces on one another, and these influences at which temperature they will be either solid, liquid, or gases. Okay. If, and we made an example, if two molecules are tight and rigidly, let's say, attached to each other according to the type of bonds, it means that we need more energy to break that bond. Okay, and we make this example just to visualize it like a few days ago. If I'm strongly attached to another person, holding our arms, okay, we need a lot of energy to break this bonding here. But if I'm holding just by hand, it's another story. We need less energy. If we are holding with a different kind of bonding, with just the little finger against each other, like a little touch, it will be necessary. It would be enough to actually break this bonding. Okay, so bottom line, we need more energy to break a stronger bond. Okay, that's something that we can visualize in daily life, and it applies somehow even to at molecule level. And so we do have then the solid, liquid, and gas phases, in which we do have that in the solid, the energy of the molecules is not enough to overcome the attracting force to allow molecules to move around, and they pretty much sit at the same spot when they vibrate there. So it means that the solid is capable of keeping its own volume.
But this bonding, you mean it's a physical bonding, not a chemical? It's a physical bonding, is it?
It's yes, but it's what we'd refer even to the chemical bonding. Yes, it's the same. It's just sometimes it's explained into the chemistry class, sometimes, but Yes, and then it's even like you need like more energy, so more energy, more energy, more energy to break that apart. And in a liquid molecules don't stay put at their place anymore, but they are able to float around freely, and they will stay together and together, so they will not fill up the entire space. So that's the reason why liquid can actually get the volume of the container, but not the entire volume. Okay, and it stays at certain level. For gases, the molecules are completely loose. Okay, so they will fill up the entire space. If we don't have a pot of boiling water, that vapor, that gas that we're producing, doesn't stay into the pot, right? It will start filling up the entire space that eventually can get. Okay.
When we are going to outer space, our blood is affected by the pressure in outer space.
Yes. Yes. In fact.
So what do they do?
Yes, and everything is pressurized, and that's even the cabins into the normal aircrafts are pressurized, right? And actually, into the space station, they are carrying several kind of experiment in absence of gravity. So they do have a lot of experiments with materials and anything, but a lot of experiments also on the human body, on how this will react. Yes. And okay, let's see now how water eventually will affect, and if there is anything that we can say about the water activity. So water activities plays an important role in a lot of different processes in food. Okay, a lot of microorganisms require a minimum water activity to be able to grow, and a lot of chemical process they don't take place when the water activity is too low, or eventually too high as well. Okay. So the water activity is the partial vapor pressure of water divided by vapor pressure of pure water. In more common terms, the water activities defines how much of the water in a product is available to be used and to make the process start. Okay, the scale of water activities goes from 0 to 1, so it's a kind of normalized scale. And if something has a water activity to zero, there is, it says in here, I wouldn't know of an example of food. It doesn't have any available water. Okay. Pure water without any addition has a water activity of 1. Okay. So that's the two extreme in this scale. Okay. So the water activity, it's not the same as the concentration of water. Okay, product with the same water content might have a totally different water activity based on how the water is bound. Okay, so it doesn't, everything even has were made by water, right? So but we're not looking at here at the concentration of water or the water content, but how this water is actually bound through the system. Okay. So water activity can be reduced by getting rid of water. So if you dry a piece of meat or dry a cookie, the water activity will go down. Okay, but this obviously goes in parallel with one of the statements that we said at the beginning, that water activity might help the proliferation of certain organisms, right? And drying the meat, it's something that has been done for a long time to actually reduce the organism to actually proliferate into this system. Okay. Yes, because most of the not I mean the one that we are facing in these days, they are trapped, let's say, into this water droplets, and this exactly, and then yes, and they need then a new form to actually survive. Now there have been like a lot of investigation how long it can survive outside a living object. That's why like we've been warning not to touch things or like to frequently destroys and kills them. In fact, let's wait for summer at least to give us exactly, exactly. It just inactivates them, but not all of them. A lot of can survive. Yes, I mean it's less is less active. People get cold even in summer, right? Normal cold and normal influenza even in summer. So I think systems that will and then nowadays I don't know if this make a difference. It's obviously it's just a stupidity. No, but in general, like in summer we live at 18, 20 degrees, which is not actually summer inside confined space because of the AC. I don't know if this makes a difference. That's something that someone should look at. I'm not competent. That's definitely that's a way of spreading. And but that's um, okay. So the two most common ways to bind water in food are by adding sugar and salt. Even though the water will not literally bind to the sugar, it will flow around it. By floating around is not available anymore. So that's the way some water can be bind, and that's why when we make something, the water, where does it go? Okay. So a sugar solution with 50% sugar and 50% water has a water activity below 0.9, which is quite high still, if we consider this scale 0 to 1. Okay? A salt solution with 10% salt and the rest water has a water activity of 0.9. Okay? Um, Okay, that's a silly statement. Good, more effective, but keep in mind that this tastes really very salty. One of the most important application of water activities is in product design. Water activity influences how a product will behave over time. So this kind of scales, this kind of approach have been actually improved and modified, studied quite scientifically, because we need to keep and preserve foods. So we want the expired date of that particular kind of food to be as long as possible, but at the same time, we don't want to lose any particular flavor or consistency and that particular food. So actually, there is a big branch of science that look into this, especially in this in the last few decades, in which has been became more and more important to stock up and to create industrial products. So water activity is related to the energy content of molecule. To foods with different water activity have a different energy. They will want to equal this out and reach an equilibrium. As long as the water is able to travel through the layers, the water activity of both will be the same over time. So what does it mean? If two products with a different water activity are placed on top of each other, water molecule will start moving from the product with the highest water activity to the with lower water activity. what the classical example that we can make it to visualize this kind of long sentences. We get a cookie and jam. We put the jam on top of it, and no matter if we keep the cookie or this, let's say, this system of two different materials with different water activity, either in this position, so biscuit below and jam on top, or like this, vertical or upside down, always what happens to the cookie? The biscuit will become very soggy. So water activity has actually respected this principle that water activity, highest water activity will affect the one with lower water activity. So the biscuit had become soggy. Okay. And in preparing cannoli, right? And we make cannoli even in here, right? Like they're slightly different from the Sicilian one, but still good. And in Sicily now it's quite popular to avoid that the crust, the external part, became soggy, to actually fill it in with chocolate. Okay, that's not for the taste. Okay, it's even for the taste, but basically the cake maker or whatever that guy is, the cannoli maker, can actually get that crust stay crunchy a little bit more than actually having ricotta directly on it, because that layer of chocolate will be a kind of dividing and avoiding this water activity to be transferred from the, let's say, humid or more humid with higher water activity into the ricotta paste, which is mixed with several things, sugar and whatever, but has a higher water activity than the crust, to actually make that crust soggy. It's like a barrier, exactly. Yes, exactly. Just to protect and to avoid that transfer of activity from the higher content to the lower content, because they tend to actually balance out to reach a kind of an equilibrium. It does change. In fact, traditionally, yes, it does change the taste. There is also the input from um, the chocolate, but traditionally, and the best way should be to keep them separate. When you're ready, you fill it up. But obviously, this, like in especially in touristic area and stuff, in which everything should be fast and we cannot wait any longer, it's not possible anymore. So we need to adapt our taste to this. But me too. Yes. No, yes, no, but the kind of the feeling, it's a little bit different as well. A little bit. The way even it's mixed and stuff, but we will go on the ricotta stuff later on. Okay, shall we take a break now and then we move to the next? Okay, let's try to complete this little journey. And one classical examples of it's how we get popcorns and actually changing their shape completely. Okay, so some varieties of corn eventually they can be dried, and what we store is just the seeds, right? And they contain about 15% of water. This water, when it's heated up, so we give energy to the system. This heat gelatinize the starch and vaporize the water inside, the water that has that is this content inside the kernel. This kernel obviously it vaporized, so it means that needs to expand, and by expanding, create some pressure. This pressure bursts the hull and releasing then some proteins that becomes in a kind of foam shape and create this kind of popcorn, classical popcorn shape. And that's the reason why, sorry, also the popcorn can be made easily and quickly in the microwave because the microwave will start transferring energy to the water molecule. This will start vibrating, the temperature will increase, and the process will start. Okay? In the microwave, yes, it's actually it's easier. And exactly, the basic principle of microwave is exactly that. So they get into resonance. So there are waves, okay, inside, and at some particular frequencies, and those waves are actually acting on the molecules, and those molecules will get in resonance, will start vibrating even more. If eh? Exactly, and this will create at the molecular level um, increase the energy, and that's why that's it's up. This I don't know. I don't think. This I don't know. It's a different way of cooking because of this. Usually, now the issue could be on the electromagnetic wave that are generated. But usually, yes, no. But usually, if the microwave is well designed, it should be shielded and nothing comes out. In fact, in some microwaves that works at the not, I don't think with at the frequency of the mobiles that we have today, but the mobiles of about 20 years ago, the old one at that frequency, ideally a good microwave, if you place the stuff inside, if it's shielded, cannot communicate with the outside. But yes,
At one point in time, you even mentioned protein.
yes.
Even the protein is
By what?
by the heat.
Yes, in fact, they expand then. Yes, and then they will become this foaming shape. But everything is triggered by the heat.
When you make ice cream as well.
Mhm. But that's because the water content, when solidifies, the water expands. So obviously, there is a lot of more food physics to be discovered. It's just a little few examples that we have, and to give us a glimpse of what's going on out there. But one nice thing that we can conclude this session with is food processing operations. In several cases, we see that are like the basic principles that our grandma or grandparents used to preserve and cooking in some particular condition. And we know that for making or preserve, making salami or ham or whatever, we need some particular conditions to treat the milk. We need some particular processes. So we will see what the industry does in terms of operations. There are like several processes: ambient temperature processing, heat process, or using steam, hot water, or oil, using hot air or very hot surface. Um, Process that can done by directly and radiated energy, removal of heat in some cases, and we know there's a lot about refrigerations, of post-processing operations that needs to be and follow several kind of steps. Now we will see some definitions of those and how they work. Yes, in some cases, yes, it does. And obviously, those are that in some cases are good for health, in some others are not. Also, those are regulated by different regulations. So, for example, EU regulations has some directives on some of them differently from what US can have, or China, or whatever. So, in some cases, there could be, yes. So heat process using steam, hot water, or oil. There are like several of those: blanching, pasteurization, heat treatments, and stuff. We will see some of those. In this particular case, it's a brief exposure of solid food to hot water or steam. Okay. In this particular case, enzymes results in tissue softening and spoilage during storage of unblanched vegetables and fruit. So by this process, we destroy enzymatic activity in vegetables and fruits. So this will reduce the number of microorganisms on the surface of the food and help that food to just stay longer. The same, but a kind of a little bit extreme, is the high temperature treatments in food. Okay, why this high temperature? Because heat treatments are used when we want to kill some of these enzymes or microorganisms that we can find on into the food. So, as the results of the treatment, the quality and safety of food product preserves, and the shelf life of food product extends. So, those are two processes in which we avoid the growing of microorganisms or even pathogenic microorganisms that can grow and um, eventually spoil our food. Okay. The differences between the two type of microorganisms that we can find. In the first case, on the left-hand side, they can cause food deterioration. Okay. The food has bad taste, bad look, and bad odor. The appearance, taste, and odor of food change as a result of microbiological growth. The consumption of food are rejected by humans. Okay, and in this particular case, the food is spoiled. We cannot eat it anymore. It's not good for our taste and whatever visual and whatever. But there are not that harmful for humans. Okay, everything stays. We just don't consume, and even if we take some, we'll recover quite fast. In case of pathogenic, they can grow on food and produce toxins. Okay, the appearance, taste, and odor and of food do not change, and humans can eat or death when consume the food that is contaminated by these pathogenic organisms. And some of those are like, and some of in the old days, like preserving some vegetables, maybe like, for example, peppers. Okay, now I don't know the English name, but it was creating like the botulino. It's kind of toxin or dangerous stuff that was producing inside, and then can create major problems when we eat. So in the first case, we see that food that changed, like its shape, its taste, odor, and whatever. In the second one, we don't. We eat, and obviously we pay the consequences because of these toxins and microorganisms that eventually would be introduced into our system. Sterilization is another treatment that involves eating as well, in which food are eaten at a sufficient high temperature for a sufficient time. Why do we use sufficient high temperature and sufficient time? Because obviously it depends the time of sterilization that we want to get. It depends on the kind of products that we do have and several other factors. So there is this level of high temperature and times will be changing according to several factors. Okay, the goal is always to destroy alive cells, spores, and inactive enzymes. Okay, the temperatures used exceed the boiling point of water, so high temperature above 100 degrees Celsius. So as a result, we'll have like shelf life more than 6 months in ambient temperature. Obviously, it's something that for several of food now we are used to, but before it was not that common. UAT. UAT, we see this kind of acronyms in several products. Okay, so in this particular case, involves eating food at about 100, 150 degrees for few seconds. Okay, and to get this product to be sterilized, and this product is placed into a sterile aseptic package and under an aseptic environment. Okay, so basically this process eats up, kind of sterilized immediately, and then the product is placed in package in a controlled environment that can stay and survive long. That's UHT, I think, is eye eating process, but for a very short amount of time. Like this, the product doesn't change the exactly the taste or anything, or very minimal. Yes, they found it exactly. UHT, in fact, I was referring, it's quite common to see into the packed milk. This and yeah, a bit, but there is a price that we need to pay. Yes, and also like even in the 1800, they started to reduce several disease, even with the tea time. That's why, like in British, it's like quite popular, the tea time as well, because and it's some practice that is done constantly in some places like India, right? If because water could be contaminated, so boiling that water before consumption actually will diminish and reduce the transmission of unpleasant factors. Okay, and so and that have exactly, they act chemically, like to disinfect and to clean up. Yes. Yes. Yes, but the UV stay trapped. Some of the energy stay trapped, increase the temperature, and that's it's enough to kill some of the organisms. And so I was telling that in the 1700, 1800, they reduced a lot of transmission with dirty water, even just consuming hot and boiled water. So, and then adding tea eventually just for some taste. But it's something that has been experimented and still in place. Like if you go to India now, and either you are recommended to get packed water of a certain quality, and always to check it out, even not to consume fresh fruit and washed under even tap water, because the water can be contaminated, and eventually to drink hot tea. I was last year in India, and I got, I think, all the tea I never drank in my life at once in about 10 days, or like a little bit more than 1 week, tea. Because in Italy, we don't drink tea too much. In here, it's quite common, right? But in Italy, it's like more coffee and no tea. So I got like, I don't know how many liters of tea in 1 week. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. No, they have, but I mean, especially in rural areas, so like not in the cities and stuff. But um, yes, evaporation is another. It's another operation commonly used to remove water from dilute liquid food to obtain concentrated liquid products under vacuum condition. This process increases the solid content of food, so we will remove. Okay. The basic example is the evaporation of water, but this, in order to dry up even several foods, it's kind of, we try to get all the extra water content and making different. Distillation, it's actually nice process that makes out several good things out of it. So it's the application of heat to separate the components of a substance from a liquid mixture depending on the boiling point. In fact, distillation, let's say factories or even distillation instruments that can be found, let's say with domestic use, they have several components. And according how this liquid mixture travels into this several components, it's able to separate the components. So for example, the alcohol can be taken away from this liquid mixture. Okay? So it's a purification process because it's able to separate components of substance. Hot air and heated surfaces are examples of processing that are quite used, and we see here dehydration and smoking are the two main important ones. Dehydration is the application of heat under some particular controlled condition to remove the major amount of water. The main purpose is to extend the shelf life of food by reducing water activity. And the water activity is also, we saw before, is the main component for deproqualification of any microorganism. Dried food are characterized by having a water activity below 0.6. Remember, the scale goes between 0 and 1, so we are halfway through. And this is done, heated air or heated surface are used to remove the water from food during drying process. Do we have any advantage of the dehydration? Okay, well, yes. The microbiology deterioration is eliminated due to the lower content, and that's what we always refer. The rate of other derivative reduction are reduced, and again, because lower content of water content. The process temperature is not enough to provide completely inactivation of enzymes, spoilage of pathogenic microorganisms. Therefore, any increase in moisture content in dried food during storage causes rapid deterioration. Okay, and that's why sometimes, and not sometimes, quite often, we see in keep this in a dry place, not humid and stuff and so on, because that increase of moisture can spoil everything and favorite the proliferation of this microorganism. Dehydration reduces product mass and volume, which improves efficiency, transportation, and storage as well. Obviously, in this context, let's not forget the time in where we live, right? So it's true that industry is looking at way of preserving food for longer time, right? And that's make our societies to survive longer than before with the same kind of stocks. But also everything is done in terms of improving efficiency. Efficiency means reducing costs and even transportation and storage. So if I can reduce uh, any product from, let's say, 1 liter or half a liter like this bottle to just the size of this, and then eventually I will add water later on during the process, it makes this uh, easier to actually uh, transport and create new stuff. Yes, but now they're very popular, like into the factories, and I think even with in some cases, of course, the reprocessing of milk powder too. So we get milk. This milk is created through these industrial processes into powder. That's yes, it's transformed. I wouldn't say completely artificial, but let's say manipulated a bit, maybe. And then they eventually can add water, or obviously there are like some processes that has to be done in the proper way. And but instead of transporting one container this big, they can transport a container this big, right? And preserve even for longer time. And obviously then there could be like a chemical addition or whatever. I'm not an expert, but in general, the food, the way we process food today has changed dramatically in respect of ideally, yes. Yes, sir.
Fresh and they're very strong. Eating all the vegetables. They're so strong, you know. When you eat fresh food, it's very, very healthy. It's different because it starts to break down even in a few minutes. When you buy it the next day. What I mean is when you cook it, food, we need the proteins, vitamins, and energy, right? So when we cook it, the minerals are still there, right?
Yes. In some cases, they can be lost.
No, no. If you don't the water, etc., and soups, you don't lose the minerals. You don't lose the vitamins. Are vitamins change with vitamins with eating cooking for a long time? In India, they cook for a long time. But what is affected? The protein